Hey, folks, and welcome back to the McKinney Podcast. We celebrate what makes us unique by nature. And you'll notice there's no intro bumper on this episode. We're jumping straight into the information. This is the first real big update episode that we have dropped probably since the very beginning of the podcast last year. Fred and Elizabeth and Allison and I, your McKinney Podcast team, have been paying close attention to what's working and what's not working. And we're going to be making some changes effective immediately to give a better overall experience to you, our listener, our viewer, and more importantly, to help expand the reach of the podcast to get as many ears and eyeballs as possible in this content. The whole reason this podcast exists is to expand the awareness of the great things that are happening in our city, making sure that as many people as possible know about the folks that own businesses and serve on nonprofits and lead our city, either in elected or a staff capacity, any number of things with current events, with big things that are coming up that we want our neighbors and friends to be aware of. We've noticed that certain things are working and certain things are not working. And there's a few new things that we're going to be doing that I think you're going to be very interested in. So there's 3 points I want to make real quick, and then we'll get you back to your day. There's no interview this week. We wanted to just make sure that everyone got this public service announcement. So the first thing is we're going to be doing away with the announced sponsors at the beginning of the episode. It was an in-kind sponsorship. There's never been any money changing hands. For the first time in our podcast history, we are going to be allowing businesses that are from McKinney to sponsor the podcast. There's going to be two different kinds of sponsoring. There's going to be one presenting sponsor that we will identify if your business wants to talk with us and see if it's a good mutual fit to be the presenting sponsor of the podcast. We're going to do that on an annual basis. We've seen how that works with the McKinney Chamber of Commerce. The McKinney Podcast is the presenting sponsor of Links, the main networking organization that meets every Wednesday morning at Gather in downtown McKinney with the Chamber. The podcast is the presenting sponsor for that organization's event, and it's been a really good fit for us. The simple fact of the matter is that we need to be able to expand our reach and have more people put more effort into what we're doing at the podcast. And right now, it's self-funded. You know, the total cost for making the podcast happen is about $850 a month. And that is just for the production cost. That's not taking into account any time value or anything else. So much the opposite of potentially making us money, which was never our goal. The podcast actually cost Fred and Elizabeth and Allison and I, roughly $425, $450 a month. So offsetting some of that cost and creating room for additional content to be created. Shorts and reels and short form content. And as we'll talk about here in just a second, additional new exclusive content that you're only going to find on the McKinney Podcast. So if you're interested in talking about annual sponsorship, we'd love to talk with you about that. The last thing we'll say on the sponsor level is Fred and I are going to start having our restaurant review, where one time a month, every month, and this is outside the regular schedule for our weekly episodes, Fred and I will bring our cameras and microphones to a McKinney restaurant. It cannot be a chain. It has to be something that is from McKinney, a local, privately owned restaurant. With apologies to the great franchisees out there, we love you. We want to support you. I'm looking at you, the Mikosinas and Bob's and the other franchisees that are here in town. First Watch, for instance, great spot for breakfast. Not going to be on the podcast because it's a franchise. So we're going to be taking recommendations from you, our audience, on where we should be going with our restaurant review. To that end, there's going to be a restaurant review monthly sponsor. We're going to do that a quarter at a time to allow people to be jumping in and supporting the work that we're doing here on the McKinney Podcast. But I will say, we want to make sure we're spreading it around. We're not going to have the same quarterly restaurant sponsor every single quarter. We want to give other people the opportunity, because the number of sponsorships we have turned down of people that wanted to sponsor the podcast in some way, that wanted to support the podcast and get their name out there to our audience, a couple dozen sponsorships we've turned down. And it just doesn't make any sense when we're trying to grow the podcast and put more actual effort into it for us to continue to deprive people that want to sponsor from being able to sponsor. And the third thing is, and yes, we have heard you loud and clear, swag is coming. At some point in the next month or two, we are going to have an online store where you can purchase McKinney Podcast swag. It'll probably keep it simple, a t-shirt, a hoodie, a hat, a tumbler, something like that. And we're not going to sell it to make money. We're going to sell it to help support the work on the podcast. And any net profit that is derived from the swag, if it gets to that point, we'll simply be donating to a McKinney nonprofit organization. We'll set up some kind of rotating schedule or something like that. But we wanted to let you know some format changes that are coming to allow Fred and Elizabeth and Allison and I to be more effective in creating meaningful, impactful, enjoyable content and reaching a broader audience. Because although we have several hundred loyal fans, there's 220,000 people in McKinney. And I know that our reach could be 5, 10, 20 times what it is. We put a little bit more effort into it. So thank you so much for those of you that are supporting the podcast, that listen regularly, that give us all the kind texts and messages and emails and whatnot. We hear you, we see you, and we're looking forward to making the podcast even better as we proceed into the coming weeks and months. So that's all for this episode. Thanks for watching and listening, and make it a great day, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk to you soon. Y'all take care.